I'm not a guru and I'm not a licensed professional. I'm definitely not here to sell you enlightenment in 6 easy payments or tell you that shifting your mindset will magically fix capitalism. But what I am is endlessly curious, and maybe unnaturally so. But if a topic so much as flirts with my brain, I dive in like a raccoon with a Wi Fi connection and no chill. And lately, I've been obsessing over this wild idea that most of our biggest societal meltdowns aren't actually resource problems or technology problems, they're perspective problems. Now, bear with me here. I know that sounds like something you'd read on a wellness influencer's Instagram, but if you hear me out, what if the thing we're missing isn't more data, more funding, or more politicians yelling at each other? What if it's just seeing differently? Let's start with the obvious train wreck, political polarization. We're living in this weird fever dream where half the country thinks the other half are literal demons, and social media algorithms are basically digital meth dealers feeding us rage hits all day long. Fun times, right? Woo! But here's the thing, and this is where psychology gets interesting. Most people aren't actually evil. Shocking, I know, but they're operating from completely different worldviews shaped by totally different life experiences. That person who votes opposite to you, they probably love their kids just as much as you do. They're just scared of different things. Perspective as the antidote is, what if we get curious instead of furious? What if instead of assuming the worst about people who disagree with us, we actually tried to understand what shaped their fears and values? I'm talking about empathy building, not the fluffy kind, but the hardcore psychological research kind. Studies show that when people genuinely understand someone's background and motivations, the dehumanization drops dramatically. And here, most of our current political divisions aren't even new. We've been here before. Civil War, Civil Rights era, Vietnam. Societies can heal from these rifts, but only when people start seeing past their tribal bubbles. The implementation isn't rocket science. Community dialogue programs where people actually listen instead of just waiting to talk. Perspective taking exercises in schools. Platforms that reward nuanced thinking over tribal loyalty. Revolutionary concept, right? Now let's talk about climate change, the elephant in the room that's literally melting the room. Here's what's fascinating from a psychology standpoint. We have overwhelming scientific evidence, yet millions of people either deny it or feel completely powerless about it. Why? Because our brains are terrible at processing abstract, long-term, massive-scale problems. We're wired for immediate threats, not slow apocalypses. But what if the problem isn't the science? What if it's how we're framing it? Perspective shift number 1, temporal perspective. Instead of talking about 2100, let's talk about what happens to today's toddlers when they're 50. Make it personal. Make it visceral. Perspective shift number 2, scale awareness. Climate change feels too big to matter, so connect it to local stuff people can see and touch. That weird weather pattern in your hometown, that's not just weather being weird, that's a preview. Perspective shift number 3, agency recognition. Stop making people feel like helpless victims of corporate greed and start showing them where they actually have power. Personal choices, community action, political engagement. The research on this is wild. When people can visualize future scenarios and connect them to their values, when they see themselves as agents rather than victims, behavior changes dramatically. All right, let's dive into everyone's favorite topic, the mental health crisis, because nothing says functioning society like skyrocketing rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide, especially among young people. But here's what gets me curious. We're more connected than ever, yet more isolated than ever. We have more mental health awareness than ever, yet more stigma than ever. What is going on? Perspective problem. We've turned mental health into a personal failing instead of recognizing it as a completely normal human response to completely abnormal circumstances. Think about it. We've created societies where people work soul-crushing jobs, live in social isolation, scroll through highlight reels all day, and then wonder why they're depressed. That's not a disorder. That's a rational response to an irrational situation. Perspective solution, normalization. Mental health isn't a character flaw, it's part of the human experience. Cultural context matters. Understanding how our societal structures contribute to mental health challenges matters. But here's the spiritual angle that gets overlooked. Humans are hardwired for connection and meaning. When we design societies that prioritize productivity over purpose, isolation over community, we're basically asking for a mental health crisis. The implementation, mental health literacy programs that actually address root causes. Community design that promotes real connection. Workplaces that don't treat humans like productivity robots. Now for everyone's favorite dinner party conversation, economic inequality. Because nothing brings a room together like talking about why some people have yachts while others choose between rent and groceries. Here's where perspective gets really uncomfortable because it forces us to examine some deeply held myths about how the world works. Myth number 1, poor people are poor because they make bad choices. Reality check. Most poor people are poor because they started with fewer resources and face more obstacles. Wild concept, I know. Perspective shift, privilege awareness. Not the guilt trip kind, but the analytical kind. Understanding how various forms of privilege and disadvantage compound over time to create vastly different life outcomes. Another perspective shift, seeing inequality as systemic rather than individual. When you realize that wealth distribution isn't based on merit, but on access and opportunity, the conversation changes completely. And here's the spirituality angle. Every major wisdom tradition emphasizes interconnectedness and shared responsibility. Yet we've built economic systems based on the delusion of radical individualism. The solutions aren't mysterious. Bias training that actually works, mentorship programs that cross social boundaries, policies designed with diverse perspectives in mind. The challenge isn't figuring out what to do, it's developing the perspective to see why we should do it. Finally, let's talk about living in the information age, or as I like to call it, the nobody knows what's true anymore age. We're drowning in information but starving for wisdom. We have access to more knowledge than any generation in history, yet we can't agree on basic facts. How's that for irony? The core perspective problem, we've confused information consumption with understanding. We've confused having opinions with having knowledge. Perspective solution number 1 is source awareness, understanding not just what people are saying, but why they're saying it, how they know it, and what their limitations are. Perspective solution number 2, cognitive humility. Revolutionary idea here, but maybe we don't know everything. Maybe it's okay to say, I don't know, or I might be wrong. Perspective solution number 3, complexity tolerance. The world is messy and complex. Simple answers to complex questions are usually wrong answers. The research on this is fascinating. People who are comfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity make better decisions than people who need everything to be black and white. They're also less susceptible to misinformation and conspiracy theories. Here's what ties all this together, and this is where it gets really interesting from both a psychological and spiritual perspective. All of these problems require the same fundamental skill: perspective taking, the ability to step outside your own worldview and genuinely consider how things look from somewhere else. This isn't just a nice to have social. This is cognitive flexibility, emotional intelligence, cultural competence, and future orientation all rolled into one. It's the meta skill for navigating complex, interconnected challenges. And here's the beautiful part: perspective costs nothing to deploy, but can yield transformational results. You don't need new technology, massive funding, or government programs. You just need to cultivate the capacity to see differently. So, I'm not saying perspective is a magic bullet that'll solve everything. I'm deeply suspicious of anyone who claims to have simple solutions to complex problems. But I am saying this: most of our biggest challenges aren't actually about lacking resources or information. They're about lacking the ability to see beyond our own limited viewpoints. We're living in incredibly complex times that require incredibly sophisticated thinking. And sophisticated thinking requires the ability to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously, to sit with uncertainty, to consider long-term consequences. The question isn't whether we can solve these problems. The question is whether we can develop the perspective-taking skills necessary to see solutions that are already there, waiting for us to notice them. And if that doesn't make you at least a little bit curious about what becomes possible when we start seeing differently, well, I don't know what will.